Hey YouTube, this is Steve from Average Joe's Fantasy Football, and I've got another mock draft video for you guys right before the NFL season starts. Now, this one is from someone from the community that had reached out who wanted to see a 10-team, 2-quarterback league with full PPR. So this is going to be a little unique. Now, he didn't say which spot they were in this 10 team, so I chose the 5th spot, which is where my home league location is in my draft. So that's coming up. So I wanted to kind of give you kind of that middle ground of where players are going to be. So because it is a 2-quarterback league, and of course still full PPR, a lot different strategy than some of the other mock drafts I've been putting. So hopefully this helps you guys out. So stay tuned. All right, so as you can see here, I'm in the 5th spot of a 10-team league, and it is a 2-quarterback league. So with that said, the draft is going to be completely different than what you've seen in some of my other mock drafts, where typically running back and wide receivers are a lot more of a need. Quarterbacks are going to be probably the most sought-after player in the first round. So let's see how this plays out. Now, in a 2-quarterback league, you should go quarterback. If you go any other position, it might hurt you when the season comes around, because quarterbacks, again, even though it's 10 teams, you got 20 quarterbacks you're at least going to start. There's still some players you got to deal with injuries. And of course, some quarterbacks just are not as good. So looking at this, you got Josh Allen as the 101. Not surprising. He is the best quarterback when it comes to fantasy, even with the changes at wide receiver. I still think his rushing ability, the way this offense is built, and he's going into, I think, year 7 or 8 now. I don't even know how many he's been in the league forever now. That helps. CeeDee Lamb here is kind of a shock. Again, you want to get rushing quarterbacks. So the fact that Mahomes is gone, kind of early for me, even though I still think he's got value. I'm going to go Lamar Jackson here because, again, I want a quarterback that can run and get me some points on the ground and, of course, in the red zone. Now, I would love to see Lamar Jackson have an improvement in the passing game, and I think he will have some, especially having Zay Flowers and a healthy Mark Andrews only helps. Now you see some of the teams, again, going wide receiver. 2 wide receivers here on these 2 teams. On team 8 and 9, if this was a real draft and your 2 league mates went wide receiver, without quarterbacks in a 2-quarterback league, they may actually have a unique strategy, but not the strategy I would go with. Having 2 quarterbacks, you want to try to get at least in the first 3 rounds. So here I got Lamar Jackson, and then obviously I can get another quarterback. Now looking at how many players are going to be picked, you're going to play a risky game if you go too early. But I am actually going to go the running back route and grab Bijan Robinson, and in hopes that I get still a really top tier quarterback in the 3rd round. Because I went running back, this whole thing changed for everybody. Now I still will go quarterback here. Again, rushing ability is huge for me. I'm going to grab Kyler Murray here, even though I'm a huge Dak Prescott fan and he has been fantastic in the fantasy world. His rushing ability isn't quite there with Murray. Murray has had to deal with injuries, but when he's healthy, Murray can be a top 5 quarterback. So the fact that I have Murray and Jackson as my 2 quarterbacks, and now I can fill out the rest of my team, I feel really good about this squad. Again, being that it's 2 quarterbacks, man, having that ability is only going to benefit you. So because now I just got to focus on the depth pieces and other players, I don't have to worry about quarterback. You may want to get a quarterback later on. Again, we're talking later on in these rounds, then that makes sense to have someone to fill in for your bye weeks. I'm not going to grab him here. So looking at the players here, I'm going to grab another running back because running back is a little bit harder. I would love to have had a premier, wide receiver, but I'm going to give Devin Achane. Look, Devon Achane is going to be a perfect play here next to Bijan Robinson, my 2 star players on this roster. And now I get to fill out wide receiver. Wide receivers are pretty deep, so I can still get a good wide receiver here. I'm going to grab Nico Collins, who I think is going to be the heavy target when it comes to CJ Stroud and the Texans this season. I get it. CJ Stroud obviously has now Diggs to throw to. He still has one of his favorite players in Tank Dell, who he vouched for in the draft. But I'm going to go Nico Collins because I think Nico Collins' size and speed and just what he was able to do last year is only going to get better. So looking at this roster here, I still got to fill out obviously tight end, wide receiver, and then obviously backups. Again, I'm not going to go quarterback yet, even though it's tempting to grab Jaden Daniels because I do believe he's going to have a great season. I'm going to grab Javante Smith just to pair up with Nico Collins to have another solid wide receiver. He is a top type of wide receiver 1 ability, even though he is the wide receiver 2 on his team. But I love grabbing Javante Smith here as my second wide receiver, who's only going to grab and continue to get value. So looking at this, I can go running back again, who, again, Ramondre Stevenson, RB1 on a team that isn't great, but is going to get opportunities. DeAndre Swift, who I really like this upcoming season. I think he's going to actually have a phenomenal season. David Montgomery, who's been a touchdown machine for the Detroit. And then, of course, James Conner. I'm going to hold off, try to get one of these running backs later on if I can in the 8th round. I'm going to look at wide receivers and tight ends to see what else I can fill. Now, looking at wide receivers here, I've got Christian Kirk, who I really like, T. Higgins. You got Chris Godwin, who I really have some excitement for, and I think high hope for this team. And then when you look at tight end, I've got Kittle, Bowers, Ferguson. Again, maybe I could possibly get them a little bit later. I'm going to go wide receiver here. And in that wide receiver room, I'm going to grab Terry McLaurin. I think he's been slept on all season so far when it comes to redrafts and mock drafts, only because no one knows how this Commanders offense is going to go. I do believe with Kingsbury being there, I think it's only going to help. Again, he's going to be able to get the best out of Jaden Daniels. McLaurin and Jaden Daniels, that's, I think, a match made in heaven. I think it's going to be fantastic. So I don't mind grabbing McLaurin as my third wide receiver who can obviously, again, put up plenty of points for me. Now I'm going to grab my tight end here because I don't want to risk in not having a top tier tight end. Now, if you're talking tight end premium, we're changing this whole draft, but here I'm going to go and grab Jake Ferguson. His floor is a lot safer, even though I like Bowers and I like what could possibly be. I think the floor of Ferguson is too hard to pass up because I think him and that connection of Dak is going to be great. And of course, you got CeeDee Lamb, who we're hoping does show up for Dallas. And then Brandon Cooks. There's not a lot of other weapons that are proven for Dallas. So Ferguson, I think, is going to be a top tier tight end. Again, at least top 8, top 10 for sure. So I've got a few more depth pieces. Obviously, kicker, defense, we'll grab those later on. Again, I will try to grab a backup quarterback. If I can get Daniels, that would be fantastic. Again, a traditional 2 quarterback team, a lot of these teams have not grabbed another quarterback, which is going to be a disadvantage, something to think about when you do these drafts. I'm okay with having my 2 quarterbacks because I don't have to worry about it later on. So looking at backup players, I'll grab Tony Pollard, who technically is RB1A to RB1B to Tyjae Spears. I'm curious how they're going to play this out, but Tony Pollard is going to have some value. I do think they're going to pass a lot more in Tennessee, and I think Tony Pollard is going to get the most opportunities going forward, so I'll grab him there. Now, looking at wide receivers, again, I want to fill this out. I love Brian Thomas. I think he's going to have a great season. I like Courtland Sutton. If I can get him a little bit later, I don't mind picking him up because he is going to be a heavy targeted wide receiver with Bo Nix now being his starting quarterback. But I'm actually going to grab Jackson, Smith, and Jigba. I think going to year 2 for him, I think Lockett gets pushed down in the depth chart. I think Jackson and Smith and Jigba goes up a little bit, and then I think he get an even better season. So now you're starting to see quarterbacks again later on. Sometimes that strategy may happen in your league. Something you think about when you're talking about your league mates. Some people will go early and grab their quarterbacks. Some people may start grabbing other players, and that may change how you draft. Sometimes you got to go with the flow, but always grab the best player available if you possibly can. And again, fill out needs, especially when it's 2 quarterbacks. You want to have 2 quarterbacks there. So looking at that, again, Jaden Daniels was so tempting me to get my third, but I don't necessarily need him. I do need to fill out more players. I'm going to grab Javante Williams here because I think Javante Williams does have a proven type of season. He's got to have a great one going forward for the Denver Broncos. I do think they're going to have more of a running back by committee. We'll see how things play out, but I think that's going to be a good one. Another player who I was half tempted to grab was Brian Robinson. I think a lot of people forget what he was able to do for the Commanders last season. I think having Jaden Daniels there helps, and I think actually having Austin Eckler does help as well. I know people are going to obviously grab Eckler because of his name and what he has done in the past, but I think a younger Brian Robinson is actually an even better option for him. I'm going to grab Courtland Sutton here because, again, I do believe in Courtland Sutton going into the season. He's got a lot to prove as well for Denver. Bo Nix, obviously, rookie. It's going to probably force feed him a little bit more than, say, Tim Patrick or even Troy Franklin. So, again, grabbing a Courtland Sutton here is not a bad move. Now, you could possibly go backup tight end here, maybe Ben Sinnott, Cade Otton. It's not a big deal. We're not talking tight end premium, so I'm not going to jump on that bandwagon just because I don't believe in grabbing a tight end as a backup. I think you can kind of stream them throughout the season. I'll grab Chase Brown here. Again, my last running back for this roster because I think Chase Brown could possibly end up being the RB1 for the Cincinnati Bengals. They're just hyping him up left and right in camp. So again, I'm going to grab him there. I did not get my backup quarterback. It's not as big of a deal. You do have something to consider when you do looking at two quarterbacks, but again, you don't have to. As long as you get your solid two, you can obviously waiver wire pick up some of these guys later on in the season. And there were still some big names in here, like Baker Mayfield, who I have high hopes for this upcoming season. I do think Bryce Young is going to have a decent season coming forward. And then, of course, if you're really kind of jumping on the bandwagon of some hope, is Deshaun Watson. No one knows how he's going to really truly play out because of injuries. He has not been the same, but maybe he does turn it around and he ends up being a sleeper for you going forward. So I'm going to grab my kicker. Kickers are such a big deal. Grab Justin Tucker here, best kicker in the game, even though I'm a big fan of Aubrey. I think Aubrey is right on the heel of him, but Justin Tucker is still number one. And then obviously grabbing a defense. Now looking at the defensive options here, Eagles, Commanders, Dolphins, Lions, so on and so forth. I actually like the Commanders. I think the Commanders defense actually will end up being pretty good going forward, especially with Dan Quinn at the helm at head coach. So that is my 2-quarterback league draft going forward. Now, again, this is a 10-team league. If it's 12-team, obviously things would draft a little differently, but you always want to try to grab 2 quarterbacks early, at least in the first 1, 2, 3, maybe 4th rounds to get your team set up and then start filling out the rest of the roster. If you guys thought this was a great draft or have other types of formats, hit me up in the comments down below. If you felt I kind of reached on players or you felt this was a great value or a really good roster, let me know. I'd love to see the feedback. If you guys haven't already, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Stay tuned because we've got more mock drafts coming before the season starts. And of course, start and sit videos will be coming out real soon when the NFL season starts. So again, subscribe, like, and I'll check you guys out next time.